relationship. That's like the Holy Grail, isn't it? That's something that perhaps only the initiated few actually understand. So that's why I'm excited this morning to have coffee with Jonathan and Andrea Taylor Cummings. They've written a book, The 4 Habits of All Successful Relationships. So, Jonathan, hi Andrea.
Hi there.
Hello, we're delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. I am starstruck because I haven't actually met anyone with 2 million YouTube views.
Well, you still haven't. Because it's not quite 2 million yet. It's 1.956 or something like that.
I will tell you a story about that. So when, we were delighted to have the opportunity to do the TEDx talk. It was scary and exciting at the same time. And our hope was that we would have at least 3,000 views. 5,000 views would be a wonderful dream come true, because we were told that, they either do a few hundreds or they
But the average is about 5,000, something like that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so we just wanted to hit that.
Right.
So to be at almost 2 million views and for it to still be growing, makes us feel great. But beyond that, it just confirms that the 4 habits are so fundamental that they're resonating around the world. And that's amazing.
Well, like I said, it's like finding the Holy Grail. It's something that all of us want to know. How do we do
people
this?
are certainly interested in the topic.
So can we start at where we are now and then work backwards? Mm-hmm. So I know that you had the TED Talk in 2019.
That's right, yeah.
And then very quickly it became a hit.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. And then you wrote a book, and now you've got an organization that helps couples, that helps individuals, helps corporations.
Yeah.
And I also saw that you actually have support for people whose relationships suffered in COVID.
Yes. Yes.
So it's quite amazing. It's a success story. And like you say, it's addressing a real need. Mm. So tell me, what were you doing before that?
Well, the story is Andrea came to the UK to get her master's. And she got her mister as well.
Love that.
So boom.
Do you know what? That just keeps on giving, doesn't it?
And it's always, he always gets a kick out of saying.
But it was business school that we met at.
Yeah.
And because we had the business degrees, we went out into the wide world and we worked and so on. We thought, we've got the experience, we've got the business degrees, we're in love. We'd had the awesome opportunity to go and live and work in Japan for a year. So we were away from family influences and friends, and we really bonded as a couple.
Yeah.
We thought, that's it, we've got everything. What else does it take? How hard can it be to run a business? 3 months, that's how long it took us to discover just how hard it could be. It was a real challenge. But through that, and we'll expand on this a bit more, but through that we learned really that the problem, well, for me the problem was, it was fairly simple. For me the problem was, I was hoping Andrea was going to be a mini-me, and when she turned out not to be, it was a problem for me. Because I could see my own strengths, I could see what I was doing right, and why was she doing everything differently?
Right.
Wrong.
I was gently trying to say, well, actually, if you do it like this, we'll be fine. This is the way to do things.
We're going to get to this. This is quite crucial, I think.
So yeah, but and actually what we learned way back then was, it was our strengths. Well, I could see my own strengths. No harm in that. I'm very much a engineer at heart, very logical mindset, very much attention to detail. Whatever I deliver to a very high standard. I expected everybody would do exactly like that. And when Andrea didn't, I had a problem with that. But it's only until I realized, actually, this was my world, and yes, I was delivering this to a very high standard. But actually, there were things that she was doing out here that I couldn't even see. Yeah. And then I thought, hang on, wait. Maybe I do have some weaknesses here.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was a big eye-opener to say, actually, somebody else has some real value here that they're bringing to the party.
Right.
And one person can't have it all.
Yeah.
And also...
Yes, I had this, but she had some other stuff there.
Yeah.
But also realizing that the things that he did well are his strengths.
Yes.
And not everybody has that. The assumption, I think, that we both had is that everybody sees the world that we see it. And if you're not doing what we want you to do, is because you see it, but you can't be bothered, or you're being lazy or sloppy. So we spent a lot of time criticizing each other, not realizing that what we brought to the party was pretty special, and what they're bringing is special as well.
So tell me about the 4 habits.
The first learning that we had then was recognizing differences, really getting to understand, respect, and appreciate differences, the different strengths that we bring, and becoming real team out of that. That was a real learning point. And it was such a transformation in the way we turned up to the relationship with each other and the way we interacted with each
Yeah.
other, that we figured if this was a challenge for us with all that we already had going for us in the relationship,
Yeah.
who else could this be a challenge for? And so we just started sharing what we knew then with everybody who would listen, with family, with friends, and through the church into the community.
Yeah.
But as we shared, we also developed this appetite for everything to do with relationships. How do you do relationships well? And so we became avid students of the whole topic.
I was
And
just
over
gonna
the
say,
years, I've been
as we
developing.
shared the material, nobody else was talking about their problems, but they were happy to listen.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, tell me more, tell me more.
Yeah.
And then, eventually people started opening up to say, actually, they were going through very, very similar
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah.
So it made us realize, actually, what we were going through was nothing unique.
Right.
Everybody's going through these challenges. People weren't talking about it,
Yeah.
but the reality was they were absolutely facing the hurdle.
So people had to sort of trust, and like you. They
Yeah.
heard your message a lot, and
Yeah.
then they were able to be vulnerable and say, okay, actually, I'm having the same problems.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a prerequisite to the 4 habits, and you've just touched on it really, but we'll get into it because there has to be fallow ground, I feel. But can we go through the 4 habits? I just want to get in there.
Okay.
So I've heard in a lot of your talks and in the book that it was the working situation that brought
The
the
differences,
conflict.
yeah.
And, yeah. So habit number 1:
Yes.
be curious, not critical.
Oh, well done.
You
you
got
have this down.
You know what? I'm finding the gold here. That's what I want. I'm right in it. Be curious, not critical. And so I have, and we're going to go individually, take
Okay.
the habit individually. So Andrea, I need help with 2 points here.
Okay.
The curiosity bit.
Yeah.
So we've been in this for time. I know you, you know me. There's no surprises. I know what you're going to say before you say it. How hard is staying curious? How easy is it to stay curious? Point 1, like I read that and I was like, yeah, that's all good, but point 2, so we all say how different we are. What we really mean is, as you said initially, Jonathan, if you were more like me, we'd be cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you were more like me, we'd be cool. And it's hard not to criticise when I know I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. Don't we all?
So that's where the battle begins.
So a great point to get more curious is when they've done something different to what you expect. When you're frustrated or irritated by the way somebody behaves, you might think you know them inside out.
Yeah.
You assume you know why they do what they do, obviously because they want to irritate you and because they're choosing to do something the wrong way instead of doing it your way.
Right.
But that's exactly the moment when they're probably expressing who they are, and curiosity is about finding out how they think about things, what's made them do what they did or said what they said, to become more curious in that moment, to understand their perspective of the world more than yours. Because we live in our own world and we put ourselves at the center of the world.
Yeah.
So everything is about us. People behave a certain way because they wanted to do something for us or against us. It's never because they have a completely different way of thinking about things, but guess what?
Right.
They do.
I was going to say why is the key word in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's once you understand why somebody has done what they've done. You might think, yes, I get this person, I know what they do all the time. But quite often we don't understand what their driver is. Why did they do this?
Yeah.
And once we understand why they did it, then we can usually say, now I get it.
Yeah.
You didn't do it because you were trying to wind me up. You didn't do it because you were being lazy. You didn't do it because you just wanted to be difficult. You did it because you thought it was the right thing to do. And this is why you thought. It's because you're born
You're
that way, you
wired
think that
that
way, you're
way.
wired that way, you
Yeah.
grew up that way, you were influenced this way as a child or whatever it is, for whatever reason. And in habit 1, be curious, not critical, what we help people do is unpack all those differences and help you understand what's the reason, why this difference.
So John's very much attention to detail and
Yeah.
and he needs information clearly laid out, very structured with all the detail.
Yeah.
I'm more of a free flower. Tell me the story. I want to know the what could be described as the fluff around it. But to me, it's important to engage with the story, the emotions. And so I would, one of the classic examples we had was when we had a proposal to do in the early days, I would write the way I like to read it. What's the story? What's the goal? How are we going to get there? And I present it as my thoughts flowed and shared with John to say, what do you think about this? And he would look at it and
I wasn't impressed.
No.
I need
It's
to
a polite way of
see.
saying
I need
it.
to see the structure.
Right.
So say I go to a talk and somebody gets up on the platform to speak. I like them to tell me what's this about.
Okay.
This is the topic. Well, guys, today we're going to be talking about this,
Right.
and this is where we're going with this. I can follow you then. I'm there. Boom, 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 all the way through. I've got it. If you just start talking randomly, just throwing points out there, you've lost me. Andrew's quite happy to sit there and just take it all together at the end, just go, doom.
Yeah.
Here you go. I'm like, what was that
Yeah.
about? So I need the structure.
Right.
And recognizing that difference. So when the example that we share sometimes, we shared in the book, is when we come back from this client meeting, we had to put a proposal together for them. We spoke about it, said, okay, these are the points we're going to deliver. Andrew took this thing to write up the proposal, and she said, here you go, John. She spent a good amount of time doing it. Here you go. Here I looked at this thing. I'm like, where's all that structure we spoke about? Where's the story? Where's the... This was just a brain dump of ideas as far as I made out. And so I wasn't impressed, and I passed it back to her, and that didn't go down so well.
Because he didn't just pass it back. I think we passed a few words between each other because he was frustrated that I didn't have, the outline clear and the structure. I was frustrated that he couldn't push past all that detail that can come after in my book and see the nugget, the brilliant ideas in there on how we would work, the process we would use to get win-win for the client and for us. And that was a real learning. It was painful. It was frustrating. We're rubbing each other the wrong way in so many times. But out of that, we learned that we had different ways of processing information.
But can I just interject there?
Yeah.
You say you're in the middle of it, you're frustrated, you've handed it back and gone, don't know what that's about, and you're saying, what do you mean?
Yeah.
The sophistication to go, oh, this is because he's not processing things in the same way I'm processing things. That's a sophisticated way of thinking.
No, we didn't have that back then.
We didn't go straight
sure.
there. I have to
I know,
say.
but even still, for people who read it and think, this is about the skills and the learning.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example now. So, as you know, we've written the book, and that we did now. That's an up-to-date example. So with that, what we did was we said, okay, how are we going to write a book together? We want to write this book. So we sat down and we had the conversation about the structure. And same thing. Andrew then went off and then wrote the first draft. And she gives it to me. I'm like, okay, all right, breathe deeply. Didn't respond the way I used to respond, but...
And that's the learning.
Yeah, and that's the learning. So I sat down and I went through with my, red pen, but red, I did do the paper, red pen, lots and lots of red. I'm like, oh gosh, here we are rewriting this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then did my edits in track changes and Word and so on, send it back to her, and of course it's then quite a different thing to what she had put initially. The ideas are still there that she had initially, but in my mind it's a completely different thing that I've written because I've rewritten it and I've changed it and so. But the reality is, actually no, there's a lot of the stuff that you put in there was still there.
You've added the structure.
I've structured it, I've tweaked it, and then so this goes backwards and forwards. But there's a temptation to kind of go, okay, well now I've got it perfect. Back to you. Don't touch my stuff now, just leave it there. But actually, the recognition that's come from the way we've learned to work over the years is that she will then, massage it again and give it back to me, and I massage it again. We fight it until it actually gets to the point. Not fight each other, but fight the thing. So the focus is no longer on us. It's on what we're working on.
That's the important
Recognizing that we've got to kind of park our egos here and just expect, and we've come to learn that actually when we go through that process, the end result is so much better than what either of us could have produced on our own.
Okay, that's brilliant.
That was the
learning. And almost nothing has changed in the sense that your personalities are still intact.
No,
and we still frustrate each other.
But you've learned to work on things differently.
To stand on the same side and look at the problem rather than to stand across the table and attack each other.
And I say, I know this is going to be a fraught process, but the end result is going to be great. So let's just park egos and just work with it. Okay, I know. I wish you hadn't changed that, but okay, you changed it. Okay, where's the good in this? It's good. Let's treasure hunt for it.
Trust the process.
That's helped me actually get past my look, I know already. There's a certain amount of humility.
A whole lot of humility,
isn't there?
Yeah, a whole lot of humility.
You really got to unlearn that that your belief system, your value system, everything that you think is right.
And when you've done it, you think, of course, look, this is great. You can put it out there now.
Yeah.
But having given it to her, and she's then made some changes, like, oh, actually, that's a nice thing. That's a nice way of changing that. Nice thing of putting that back. Yeah. And it was, I don't know, multiple times of going backwards and forwards between us before we got to the final draft. And now when we look at it, we actually go,
Yeah.
That looks good.
Yeah.
Thank
The
you. That was
ideas
good.
actually get communicated in a way that lands well with a lot more clarity and so on between us.
And so have you reached a point where you're curious to see what turns up when you've got something to work on instead of...
We still have to breathe deeply sometimes and say, no, we're going in the right direction. But so a phrase that we have learned is, help me understand. Just help me understand what it is that you're seeing that I'm not seeing.
Okay.
Try and say that with all the emotions under control.
Yeah.
Trusting that the process will get you there and giving each other space to do what we do best.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could just spend all your energy criticizing what the other person does and not get the beauty of what you can do together.
What you can do together. Fantastic. That's really... You've helped me with my 2 points.
Okay, good.
All right, next challenge.
Habit number 2.
Be careful not crushing. And the image that we use when we have it visually is it a dandelion?
Yeah, I think so. You know those where you see them growing wild?
Yeah.
It's like a very fluffy
think it's
thing, and when the wind
yeah.
blows, you get all the little bits going off.
But if you held it tight,
You'd crush
you'd
it.
kill it.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's a lovely,
Be careful
lovely,
not crushing.
lovely one. I liked that one because of the doable actions that I felt you'd put in there. So there were fences. So this was about fencing, boundary. When you got to a place of frustration, you had already put some sort of preemptive measures in there
Yes.
so that you didn't want to go, you keep doing this. You just talk such nonsense. You're such an idiot. You've already got the kind of barriers and boundaries in place.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you take us through this one. And
So habit number 2, be careful not crushing, is a crucial one. Well, they're all crucial. But habit number 2 is one that we need to have in place because most of us are not... We're not naturally good at handling conflict. And we think conflict is a bad thing. When it happens, problem. The reality is conflict is going to happen. It absolutely will happen. The moment you have 2 living, thinking, breathing people who have opinions, when you have different opinions, you have conflict. It's how closely you hold those opinions to yourself or how involved you are with those opinions that can then lead to a lot of conflict. But conflict is going to happen. Let's not kid ourselves. It's inevitable. The conflict is not the problem, it's how we handle it that's the problem. And usually we handle it from a selfish perspective. We handle it based on what's important to us. So if I'm a certain personality type, I might want to always win an argument. There are a lot of people like that out there. And if you always end up winning, what happens to the other person?
always end up losing.
How does that make them feel?
Bad.
Do you think they want to stick around in that relationship? Or probably not.
Mm.
So if you always want to win an argument, you need to learn that actually some arguments, okay, but not everything. Sometimes, where does the relationship win in this argument?
Right.
Yeah, and it may be that sometimes actually I just need to, fine, I'll go with you on this one.
Yeah.
That makes you feel a lot better. It's better for the relationship. It may be that in a conflict situation, you want to just get out of there. You want to escape. Not also ideal for a relationship. So really the success from handling a conflict is about what's the us-centered or we-centered solution. What's best for the relationship. If you can focus on that, you have your best chance of success.
And it's also about treating each other well in the moment of conflict, so that when you come out of the conflict, you have better understanding and you've not done things that took chunks out of.
You haven't torched the earth.
Yeah. You haven't damaged the relationship.
Yeah.
You can actually use the conflict to strengthen it. So how do we develop the skills to manage the process in a way that we strengthen rather than damage the relationship?
I guess it's important to recognize that in a conflict situation, as I said earlier, we're selfish. We really want what's best for us.
Yes.
And what we need to do is retrain our brains to actually say what's best for this relationship. And that goes back to the point you were saying about putting boundaries and things in place.
Yeah.
So I like to think of conflict, or we like to think of conflict as a battle. It's a boxing match. To give you a visual picture, you're training for your match. Well, rather, you've got a boxing match there. If you know you've got this thing coming, you've got to want to be prepared for it. You don't just sort of turn up in the ring all flabby and you know what's going to happen to you in the ring. So okay, you're not in a relationship like this. You're not going in with boxing gloves on, but you just want to be ready to handle conflict in an effective way. So we say prepare for the battle. Learn how to fight fair during the battle, because if you fight dirty, that could just take you down all sorts of, you can spiral very quickly. And then you also need to learn how to restore the connection afterwards.
Right.
And I was going to say, and that's the bit that a lot of us forget, is how to recover, how to restore the connection after. And so we take chunks out of each other emotionally, and then the relationship just stays with that lowered emotional state, and not get intentionally replenished or revived or restored. So connecting after upset is really important. And people will say to us, we share these habits, not that we have perfected it, not that we've mastered everything, but we always say we know how to fight better and how to recover faster.
But there's a part to our brain called the limbic, which is our fight or flight. It's our emotional machine. And there's a great book out there which we highly recommend. It's Steve Peters' book. Steve Peters, some people may know, is the Professor Steve Peters. Give him his full title, Dr. Professor Steve Peters. But he is the psychiatrist to Team GB's cycling team over the last 10 years. So he I guess, is the man behind part. I'm sure he wouldn't take the success fully for himself, but the rise that they had to fame over the last 10 years, he's been the psychiatrist, helping them focus the mind on winning and, dealing with the stress of all that sort of stuff. Anyway, he explains basically what happens in the brain in conflict. We haven't got time to go into the detail of it, but basically he says there's a part of our brain which is the limbic, and he calls that the chimp. He says it's our emotional machine, and it's all about self-preservation.
Yeah.
So in a conflict situation, what it does is it goes to work to say, how do I protect me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's very powerful. There's another part of the brain called the frontal, which is where all our logical, rational,
our best
self type thing lives.
Yeah.
But the chimp is much, much more strong. It's much more powerful. So it's like in the jungle, it takes 5 human beings to control a chimp.
Right.
Same way in our brain, the chimp is 5 times stronger than the human.
Right.
So when conflict happens, they both get fired up. Chimp is always going to win because it's stronger.
Right.
And that's why you end up doing things and saying things and you go, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. I'm so sorry. Or whatever.
Yeah.
You may not even say that, but you might feel it. You're not proud. Things that you're not proud of, it's because the chimp took over. So what he explains is there's a third part of the brain that gets involved in conflict called it's actually technically called the parietal. He says, let's call it the computer. It's like a data center. It's a library that stores all this, your values, your beliefs, all your information around, this is what I could be doing, should be doing. And in a life-giving nanosecond, after these two are fired up, the human and the chimp, they'll both check in with the computer and say, you've got any instructions for me? If there are no instructions there, they'll go to work. The chimp will win because it's stronger and you'll end up doing the selfish thing.
Yeah.
But actually, if you pre-program the computer and give it instructions to say, this is what I want you to do. This is how I want to turn up in a conflict situation. This is the person I'd like to be. This is the person I'll be proud of. Then what you need to do is give it instructions. And in the book, what we talk about there is we say you need to set, one of the things you can do is set ground rules. These are lines that we won't cross in a conflict situation. These are behaviors that will just not be acceptable, because if we do those behaviors, it's going to put us in a bad place. So in our relationship, some of the ground rules we set was, we said, look, we'd never hit each other. We agreed that right up front. That would have had all sorts of, Andrew grew up as 3 girls. I'm quite used to, with my brother fighting and so on, that kind of stuff. Used to rough behavior. And I tried that initially. Not hitting her, but I tried with, I used to think it was really fun to take a towel and, wrap it into rat tails and flicker. Hey, as boys, we would do that. That was fun.
Doesn't work.
Not enjoying that.
No. Or he used to do, was it judo?
Basically judo,
Thinking he could practice on me. No,
that's what I did. I thought it was fun.
Work.
Didn't work.
No.
So anything physical like that just wasn't going to work. So we took that off. We also said, look, we're not going to
storm out
the house and slam the door. That just wasn't going to work. That would have all sorts of
it was for me in
messages to
particular,
Andrew of abandonment and all sorts of things.
It. Yeah.
So happy to go to the other room. Maybe not slam the door, but happy to. If you need time out, go take time out.
Right.
But don't go out the house and drive off and so on. That would create or send a very strong message. So we said, okay, we'll take that off the table. And thirdly, we wouldn't use the D word. We wouldn't
threaten divorce just to be spiteful.
Yeah.
But what ground rules do is they create a safe zone.
Yeah.
And you won't go beyond that. So you can be safe and fight if you need to, but fight fair, knowing that the rest of your life and your relationship is protected. You create a safe zone through the ground rules. So the ground rules might be different for different couples, for different people. We even have ground rules with our sons. We say it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to be rude. So you don't get to walk off and slam the door either. Just to create the safety zone, and then it's okay to express your emotions within that safety zone, so everybody is protected and looked after and cared for. And that's all. It's being careful. It's thinking about the fact that this is somebody you love and value. So even no matter how frustrated you get with them, how can you put boundaries around the way you turn up and behave to make sure you're still caring and loving, even if
in that moment you really
so
don't
angry
feel
and you really
like
don't
you're-
like them.
And I think caring, not crushing, is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Really beautiful kind of way of containing it.
Yeah.
And you know, we've spoken so far about before the battle, during the battle, really, really important to listen. When conflict is on and tensions are high, most of us aren't listening. All we're doing is, while the other person is speaking, sometimes we don't even wait. We're reloading.
Right.
We're reloading. We literally are just getting our next argument ready to fire back at you. And I might not even wait until you pause. And once my argument's ready, I'm like, this is what I wanted to say. Am I listening to you? I haven't heard a word of what you're saying.
Yeah. Or you choose the words you hear to use that as
more ammunition.
to fire again.
Yeah. So really what we're saying is, no, take the time to actually listen. Because usually there's quite often there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So if I actually spend the time actually hearing what you're saying, I'm like, is that what you thought I meant when you said blah, 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 blah?
Yeah.
It's a completely different, you can get a completely different outcome. So spend the time actually listening.
The underlying theme that you'll find in the habits is a real challenge to us to grow up. We don't want to grow up. We go into relationships with our own expectations of the other person and what life is going to be like, and everything's going to be the way I've dreamt it, and without discussing it with you, you're going to know what that looks like, and you're going to perform to my song sheet or script. In a relationship, especially in a couple relationship where you're up close and personal with each other day in, day out, all of that gets challenged. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, who do we want to be and how do we want to turn up to the relationship? Because quite often the downward spiral is getting caught in an action and reaction, and then a reaction to the way you behave, the downward spiral, and not knowing how to stop it and how to get out of it. Because the very same people who might be spiraling downwards and being awful in this relationship is brilliant in every other relationship. So it's not about who you are, it's who you are together and how you face off with each other and how do you develop the skills to do that conversation better.
And a bit like when in the first habit, I was saying it really requires humility. I think in this one, I feel that there's a lot of fear driving the behavior. You know, there's a lot of fear that if I am not right, I lose.
Yeah. There is, and that links very neatly to habit number 3.
Girl,